Okay. About the meetings?
Oh, go ahead.
No, you're going to tell about meetings.
Oh, yes. All right, let me grab a microphone. Yes, tonight the meeting is for the Biblical Creation Group, and Dennis heads that up, and he's organized us all and done a lot of work to put it together tonight. We thank you very much for that. And we meet every month on the second Monday of the month at 6:30 p.m. here. And sometimes we have live speakers. A lot of times we have just videos that we watch and things like that. And we always have good lively discussion after, and snacks and some refreshments too. So if you can, please join us. It's a good place to get filled up and hear the other side of the story, the true side, sometimes. So with that, I just wanted to introduce you to Dennis Crass tonight, and you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Before I get going, there are 150 DVDs, if you'll see, in the front of the church here. If you would like to take any one of those home, or two, just open it up. There's a card inside of each one. Put your name and phone number and address on that and put it in this red can. I have about 40 books over here. Again, if you'd like any of those. Those do not have a slip in them, but there's a pack of slips on the end of the pew here. Again, if you'd fill that out and just put it in the can, and I'll follow up in a couple of weeks to see if you're done with it or whatever. So anyway, before I start, I'd like to say that I'm no professional speaker. I don't know if I even qualify for being an amateur. But I feel this is a very important subject for the church. And I'm following the instructions found in 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 10. Each one should use whatever gift he has received and serve others. So here we go. I would like to start with a few facts that perhaps many of you already know. First being that this planet Earth is rotating around the equator at the speed of 1,000 miles an hour. Secondly, it is traveling around the sun at 66,000.6 thousand miles per hour. The Earth moves in its orbit around the sun, which is a total of 584 miles. And it departs from a straight line by only 1/9 of an inch. So in other words, every 18 miles, the curvature is only 1/9 of an inch. If it were 1/8, we would eventually burn up. And if it were 1/10 of an inch, we would eventually freeze. The Earth is unique in that it is the perfect distance from the sun and has the perfect gravitational pull, the perfect atmospheric gases, and abundant amounts of liquid water, resulting in the perfect habitable zone for life. Isaiah 45:18 acknowledges this. It says, "He formed it to be inhabited." How did the solar system become so organized? Evolution is about chaos and random chances, not design, organization, and systems. Our solar system shows order. Even the name we give it, the solar system, shows we know that it was organized. We do not call it the solar accident or solar disorder, but the solar system. Order does not happen by accident or chance. Order means there must be someone who put it together in an orderly system, and that orderly system's maker is God. And finally, the Milky Way, which the Earth is part of, is speeding through space at an estimated 2,237 miles an hour. All these speeds are so perfectly tuned that we can make a vehicle and send it on a trip of 228 million miles to Mars and be off by only 2 seconds on its projected landing. There is no way that a chance explosion, the Big Bang, could produce such ongoing precision over supposedly billions and billions of years. I believe that the next few facts will prove beyond a doubt that the Earth, Sun, and Moon are young. First, let's look at some facts in regards to our Sun. Oops. Okay, let's see. Research studies indicate that our Sun is gradually shrinking at a rate of 0.1% per century, correlating to a sinkage rate of 5 feet per hour. 5 feet per hour, that seems like an awful lot. But you have to remember that the diameter of the Sun is about 1 million miles. You could place roughly 100 Earths in the Sun. At this rate of shrinkage, as little as 50,000 years ago, our Sun would have been so large that our oceans would have boiled. And in much less than 50,000 years, life would have ceased on the Earth. If you want more about that on your handout there, number 1 would give you some more information on that. Now let's look at some facts about the Moon. The Moon is receding from the Earth at the present rate of 1.5 inches per year. Now at its present recession, the Moon 6,000 years ago would have been 9,000 inches or 850 feet closer to the Earth, having little effect on the Earth. However, in 1.3 billion years, the Moon would have been touching the Earth. Touching the Earth. For a good subject on this, you could go to the internet to the Moon's recession, Moon's recession creation, the Encyclopedia of Creation, number 2 on your handout. Also, in regards to the Moon receding from the Earth, that lessens the gravitational pull of the Earth, slowing the speed of the Earth's rotation, thus making our days shorter. In 1955, the first atomic clock was developed. This atomic clock is not what you buy in the store. This clock stands 6 feet high and nearly 3 feet wide and 5 feet in length at its base. It is accurate to neither losing or gaining a second in 300 million years. In 1959, the atomic clock became the International Atomic Time System's official timepiece. By the year 1972, that's 13 years, it was found to be 10 seconds slower than Greenwich Mean Time, which is based off the rotation of the Earth in relation with the Sun. So at that time, 10 seconds were added to the Greenwich Mean Time, which was the standard of the world from 1884 until the atomic clock, as of 1959, became the world's official time recorder. The Greenwich Mean Time, however, is still used for civil time. Since 1972, 27 more leap seconds have been added. If you want more about that, you can go to number 3 on your handout there. They were added to keep time with the atomic clock. The last leap second added was on June 30th of 2019. At the current rate of the slowing of the Earth's rotation, if we go back just 1 billion years, our planet would have been rotating about once every 18 hours. Now remember, the evolutionists tell us the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. An 18-hour day would have produced tidal waves around a mile high, flooding most all of the Earth and eliminating most life on the Earth. Now let's look into diamonds. Diamonds, according to the evolutionists, are 1 to 3 billion years old. Yet, when they are tested for carbon-14, they come back with measurable amounts of carbon-14 dating 45 to 55,000 years. An excellent article on this can be found on the internet entitled, "Diamonds Have Carbon-14. Why is this important?" Number 4 on your handout there. Now let's look into coal. They tell us that coal is 100 to 300 million years old. Well, how do they explain the finding of a partial tooth metal gear in it? Boy, that's a bad slide. Can you see that at all? Okay. Anyway, the piece of coal in question originated from Skia, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, region from Russia. The Voice of Russia, an internal Russian broadcasting service, reported that since the coal deposits in this region of the country dated to 300 million years, experts are suggesting that the odd piece of metal found in the coal must be that old as well. The Voice of Russia said, when geologists broke the piece of coal in which the metal object was pressed into and spot treated it with special chemical agents, it turned out that the metal detail was unusually light and soft. It was found to be composed of 98% aluminum and 2% magnesium, which led to the implication that the metallic object was created artificially. Another important property of the object that included the researchers was its distinctive shape, which was like a modern tooth gear. So in other words, you will see many pieces of machinery that have a big round gear and they have little teeth all the way around it. Well, this had 6 teeth on it. It is hard to imagine that an object could take the regular shape of a tooth wheel with 6 individual teeth naturally found on it. Now, the next item, there's a better picture of it. Now, the next item found in coal, the creationist of large organizations suggest not referring to it, but I'm going to use it because even if it was not found in coal, it has a point of interest. The bronze bell, as for the bell, there's no proof that the bell came out of a piece of coal other than the words of a 10-year-old boy in 1944. His name was Newton Anderson, and he made a big mistake by thoroughly cleaning and polishing the bell so that upon looking at the bell, there was no trace of coal. However, the bell was submitted to the lab at the University of Oklahoma by the Institute of Christian Research, better known as ICR. The article didn't give the year the bell was submitted, but ICR was formed in 1996, so the bell had to be submitted sometime after that. There was a nuclear analysis revealed that the bell contained an unusual mix of metals different from any known modern alloy production. It included copper, zinc, tin, arsenic, iodine, and selenium. My question is, if he didn't find it in that lump of coal, where did this 10-year-old find this? And also, in regards to this bell, who and how did they produce the alloy found in this bell? We'll get to that just a little later. He kept the bell until his death, and then he donated it to Genesis Park, which is a big museum for creation. Several years before his death, at our request as the ICR, Anderson was examined by an expert polygraph specialist to further validate his claims. He passed the test, and the results were no deception was detected. I was going to use something else here, but I'm going to pass on that for another reason, that creationists of the big groups don't want you using it. Now, this is not about coal, but in stone. In June of 1934, a family discovered wood protruding from a rock. They took the rock home and cracked it open, exposing a slide, yeah, that's, pardon me, that's the slide right there. If you'll see, that's the head of a hammer and the handle, the wooden handle. They took the rock home and cracked it open, exposing a hammerhead attached to the wood. To verify that the hammer was metal, they cut into one side with a file. The nick in the metal from the file is still bright today, with no detection of corrosion. The unusual metallurgy is 96% iron, 2.6% chlorine, and 0.7% sulfur. How is it that a hammer made of metal purer than any metal smelting techniques used in the modern industry could be found in a piece of Cretaceous rock that is supposedly 75 million years old? Just a thought. Is it possible that the alloys of the bell and the hammer were made before the flood? The Bible says in Genesis 4:22 that Tubal-Cain was an instructor of every craftsman in bronze and metal. Could it be that up to 1,500 years later, when the knowledge of 200 million people were reduced to the knowledge of only 8 people? Of course, we're talking about the flood. Could it be that that technology was also lost at that time? You know, when you really think about it, the knowledge of 200 million people, and then all of a sudden it's reduced to the knowledge of 8 people. Think of the knowledge that was lost at that time. Going on back to the coal, they tell us that it is 100 to 300 million years old. When tested for carbon-14, it tests about 30 to 50,000 years old. A good article on this is Carbon-14 in Fossils, Coal and Diamonds, Answers in Genesis. You'll find that on the internet. That's number 5 on your handout here. How is it possible that diamonds, which are supposed to be 1 to 3.3 billion years old, and coal, supposedly 100 to 300 million years old, according to the evolutionist, come back with readings that are not that far apart. 30 to 55,000, in other words, only 25,000 years. The means to detect carbon-14 was discovered February 27th, 1940. For years, no one thought to test diamonds, coal, or dinosaur bones, and so on for carbon-14 because the acceleration mass spectrometer, AMS for short, it could only test at an extreme end for carbon-14 to 90,000 years. After 90,000 years, carbon is undetectable with the AMS. Now let's look at dinosaurs. Oh, pardon me. So why would you test something if you thought it was millions of years old? So now let's look at dinosaurs. A lot of people would come to the What's the Evidence booth. And of course, if some of you went through the trailer out there, for 15 years, Mary has had a booth at many of the county fairs and the state fair. I've helped her for all those 15 years. And now she's made this wonderful trailer. I mean, and from all donations, what a gift. A lot of people would come to the What's the Evidence booth and ask us, why aren't dinosaurs mentioned in the Bible? First of all, we believe that they are mentioned in the Bible. Job 40:15 to 20. Look at Behemoth, which I made along with you, which feeds on grass like an ox. What strength he has in his loins, what power in the muscles of his belly. His tail sways like a cedar, and the tendons of his thighs are close knit. His bones are tubes of brass, his limbs like rods of iron. He ranks first among all the works of God. Plus, the word dinosaur was first used in 1842. It was coined by Sir Richard Owens, and in Latin, it means terrible lizard. So how would it appear in the King James Bible, which was written in 1611? Another question is, how did Noah fit all the dinosaurs on the ark? Well, there are 668 dinosaur species, and only 5% or 33 are of the very large size. Of the 668 species, the total of only 55 kinds. And of course, if you'll recall in the Bible, it refers that the kinds were taken on the ark, not species. Some were as small as chickens. The average size was about the size of a buffalo. Of course, God would have brought young adults to board the ark, not full-grown adults. Genesis 7:9 says that Noah and his family were already in the ark as the animals came 2 by 2 into the ark. So it was God that directed the animals into the ark, not Noah. According to the evolutionary geological column, dinosaurs died off 65 million years ago. But in 1991, red blood cells were discovered in the femur of a T-Rex bone by Mary Schweitzer. And that was in Montana. This, of course, was under a high-powered electronic microscope. Even so, they were still there. And Jack Horner, her boss, said, "It can't be." He made her repeat the test 17 times before they released it to the media. Of course, with their strong belief in the geologic column, they are now trying to figure out how it's possible, rather than accept the results of the test of the bones that they were young, not 65 million years old. Jack Horner was offered $5,000 to test the bones for carbon-14. He said no. The offer went to $10,000. No. The offer went to $15,000. No. The offer went to $20,000, and they would pay $3,000 for the test, and he refused. Since then, soft tissue, red blood cells, and protein in dinosaur bones have been found in several parts of the world. See number 6 on your handout, dinosaur soft tissue on the internet. In 2012, a group of international scientists presented to the American Geophysical Conference in Singapore the results of 10 dinosaur bones from all over the world that had soft tissue with carbon-14 in them. Since dinosaurs are thought to have died off 65 million years ago, the news was stunning and more than any can tolerate. After the conference in Singapore, the report was moved from the conference website by 2 chairmen because they could not accept the findings. Unwilling to look at the data and never speaking to the researchers, they did not like the test results, so they censored them. Kind of sounds like the news media today. If they don't like it, they won't present it. On June 18, 2015, Brian Thomas and Vance Nelson reported that they had presented 16 samples of fossil specimens of fish, wood, plants, and dinosaurs to the AMS for testing. They didn't tell them where they found them or what they were. In all 16 samples submitted came back with measurable amounts of carbon-14, ranging from 17,850 years to 49,470 years. On number 8 on your handout is telling all the different years they found and what they were. Okay, after lab found out these results were released to the public, they sent Brian and Vance a letter informing them that they would no longer do any testing for them. By the way, one of the DVDs that I have up here is called Expelled, No Knowledge Required. It was a movie quite a few years in the theaters, and it's really mind-boggling how, all the teachers, professors, editors of magazines, and so on are being pushed out of their jobs if they believe in creation. In fact, the Smithsonian Institute, they put out a quarterly magazine, and so the editor lets somebody put a article in there about intelligent design. He never once mentioned God, but intelligent design. Within 2 weeks, he was let go. That's the way the world is today. So why do these readings exceed 6,000 years as we believe the earth is? For the answer, we have to look to the magnetic field. At the present time, the magnetic field is decaying at 5% per century. 1,000 years ago, it is estimated to have been 40% stronger than today. See the article on the internet, Rapid Decaying Magnetic Field by Andrew H. Snelling, number 9 on your handout. The magnetic field of the Earth extends into space around the Earth. It provides a protective shield and against cosmetic rays and solar winds. The stronger the magnetic field, the less carbon-14 that is produced in the atmosphere. So at the time of the flood, when all the fossils were formed, and most of the dinosaurs, except those on the ark, were buried and destroyed, the carbon-14 in them from the atmosphere would have been a lot less than the readings of today's atmosphere, giving an older age. Just how much was the carbon-14 in the atmosphere 4,500 years ago at the time of the flood? We don't know. But if the magnetic field was 40% stronger just 1,000 years ago, therefore, it definitely would have been a lot more than 40%, therefore giving a lot older reading. There's a good article on that, a creationist puzzle, 50,000-year-old fossils, again by Andrew Snelling. That's number 10 on your handout. If dinosaurs died off 65 million years ago, how is it that explorers in Peru, starting in 1525, found stones and pottery with accurate carvings of dinosaurs along with people on them? Over the years to the present, over 15,000 of these items have been found. Some people say these are fake, and there are a lot of fakes out there. However, on the real ones, the surface of these rocks had a varnish or patina that is the result of bacteria and minute organisms which have adhered to them. A good black varnish or patina takes about 1,000 years to discolor and coat the stones. Etching on the fake stones would have removed this varnish or patina in the areas where they were engraved. Since the real rocks have developed varnish and patina in the grooves also, it seems likely that they have been carved long ago. These stones were first recorded by a Jesuit missionary, Pedro Simpson, who accomplished Perezro in Peru in 1525, and examples were brought back to Spain. And this is the book. If any of you want to take it home, it'll be laying there with the others. It's just full of pictures of these stones and all the engravings on these stones. How did people living well over 1,500 years ago, or perhaps as many as 2,500 years ago, know what a dinosaur looked like if they never saw him? Some were very accurate, describing designs in the skin of the dinosaurs, designs that had not been found until about 70 years ago in fossils. An excellent read on this is Secrets of the Inca Stones. That's the book I just showed you, number 11 on your handout. And a good video on the internet is Ancient Artwork, the Inca Stones and Dinosaurs, number 12 on your handout. There are many carvings, pictures, and engravings of dinosaurs all over the world. A very accurate carving of a Stegosaurus, I probably slaughtered that too. Okay, but you'll see all the big fins on top of the back.
Yeah.
Those were only discovered in fossils about 70 years ago. Let's see. Okay. And these carvings were found on the wall of a monastery in Cambodia, built in 1200 AD. The first known finding of a Stegosaurus fossil was in 1876 by Charles Marsh of Morrison, Colorado. So how did they know what this dinosaur looked like in the 12th century if they had not seen one? Another area where there's a carving of this same dinosaur is in, Randy, can you help me? The cathedral in London that it's in, where Darwin is buried? Okay, anyway, there's a big cathedral in England, and there's a carving of a dinosaur over the grave of this one person, and it's very detailed again. And of quite a few years now, if you go through that cathedral, there's a big rug over that carving of that dinosaur. Up until now, most of these areas have been fairly simple to figure out with simple math or logic. Now let's look into a few that are more complicated. Let's look at a small or large cut on skin. Although blood clots forms within minutes of the cut, the process of clotting is very complex. It involves 12 chemical steps that have to occur precisely one right after the other. If any one of these steps fail, you would bleed to death. Environmentalists tell us that all these changes come as a result of mutations or natural selection. The fact that 98% of all mutations are harmful or of no benefit, how long would it have taken to form this 12-step process of blood clotting? It simply isn't possible. Now let's look at our lungs. I just was reading in a book not too long, and it just caught my attention that, our lungs are what generate all the oxygen for us in our system. And then they compared it to a tree. And doesn't it look a lot like a tree? What does the tree do? Provides our oxygen. They contain approximately 15,000 miles of airways and 3 to 5 million hollow cavities, having a total surface of about 70 square meters, or roughly the size of 1/2 of a tennis court. Also, if all the capillaries that surround the lung cavities were unwound and placed end to end, they would extend for 616 miles. At the time of birth, a baby's lungs are not inflated and are actually filled with liquids that are secreted by the lungs when the body moves out of the birth canal. A sudden change of environment and temperature triggers the first breath, which usually takes place 10 seconds after the baby is delivered from the birth canal. Again, this all happened by chance, by way of mutation. Now I'd like to cover the subject of the Earth's population. What was the population of the Earth at the time of the flood? Well, they estimate it was probably as many as 200 million, as I had said previously. Roughly 4,500 years ago, at the time of the flood, the Earth's population was reduced to 8 people. The Bible makes no mention of Noah and his wife having any children after that. Let's see, where was I? Okay, and so the Bible says that all the population of the world came from Noah's 3 sons. If we go back 45,000 years when the flood occurred and figure out the population of the earth at 2.9%, it comes out to roughly 7 billion people. As of 2020, the productive rate of the world was 2.5. Evolutionists insist humans have been populating the earth for millions of years. Do you have any idea how many people there would be on earth in just a million years, even if the population growth was reduced to 1/4 of the present population rate? With just a supposedly million-year history, history of man, there would have been an incredible 25,000 generations at 40 years each. At the present rate, the present population would be represented by a number 10 with 2,100 zeros after it. Evidently, that's impossible. If you were to fill the entire universe with tiny electrons, you would only pack in the number 10 with 130 zeros after it. Even more incredible is the fact that the final total of people amounts to only the present population of about 7.5 million people. A good book on this is How Did We Get So Many People in Such a Short Time? By Jonathan Safarti. I probably murdered that too. Number 13 on your handout. I'm not too good at French. I'm not even too good at English. We are all familiar with the geologic column. This column supposedly goes back 2.6 to 4.5 billion years. And that means that Jesus lied in Mark 10:6 when he said, at the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. According to the geologic column, the first humans emerged in Africa about 2 million years ago, long before the modern humans known as Homo sapiens appeared on the same continent. The development of the geologic time scale or table begins with Nicholas Stendhal, 1638 to 1686. His work was followed by James Hutton, 1726 to 1797, and finally Charles Lyell, 1797 to 1875, who published a book, The Principles of Geology, in 1830. In this book, he divided the Earth's strata into 3 divisions. He dated them as youngest, older, and ancient. Lyell said he wrote the book to free science from the writings of Moses. In other words, the first 5 books of the Bible. Over the years, different areas were added. See number 14 on your handout. In these areas, the geologic column grew, and so did the time scale. In 1760, it was estimated by those who believe in the theory to be about 75,000 years. By the year 1879, the column was completed as we view it today. In a span of just 90 years, it grew from 75,000 years to 4.5 billion. Why is the addition of all this time so important? This is from the Scientific American Journal. It says, given so much time, the impossible becomes possible, the possible becomes probable, and the probable virtually certain. One only has to wait. Time itself performs the miracle. The basis of the theory of these areas were devised when little was known about the strata and the fossils. These areas were introduced long before any of the modern methods of dating were developed. See number 15 on your handout for more about that. But geology and paleontology has been saddled with this antiquated column ever since. Nowhere is the geological formations can we find all the strata in order, all the strata out of order, most of the strata in or out of order. Instead, we only find little bits here and there, and frequently they are mixed up out of their theoretical sequence. Never are all the stratas in the theoretical column, geological column, to be found in one complete sandwich anywhere in the world. Most of the time, only 2 to 8 of the 21 strata can be found. Even in the Grand Canyon, only about half of them are found. The only place the geologic column is found is in books, museums, and diagrams. If the evolutionary interpretation of the geologic column is correct, God allowed hundreds of millions of years of death, disease, genetic defects, and deformations before the original sin of Adam. Looking at the geologic column, one is led to believe that the younger the chart gets, the more higher the order of fossils that are found. By higher order, we mean birds and humans that, according to the column, are 70 million years or younger. But is that the case? 95% of all fossils are of marine origin, and they are found all over the world, even on top of Mount Everest. How could that be? Maybe a worldwide flood? Of course, the remaining 5%, 95% of that is plant life. Insects are 0.02% of the whole, and only 0.01% of all the fossils are of the higher order. How are fossils dated? When a fossil is found, how do they determine the age of it? The following is taken from the World Book Encyclopedia, Volume 7, page 427. Scientists determine when fossils were formed by finding out the age of the rocks of the earth in which they lie. And how do they determine the age of the rock or the earth? The following is taken again from the World Book Encyclopedia, Volume 15, page 103. The age of the rock or earth is determined by the fossils found in them. That's ridiculous. That's what it is. If this was introduced as evidence in a court of law, it would be thrown out in a minute. Now, a lot of people say to me, why are you so dogmatic about the subject of creation versus evolution? They say, just give them the gospel. We all know that a 24-hour day creation is not a salvation issue. However, if they don't believe in the Genesis account of creation, it will certainly put a lot of doubt in their minds about the rest of the Bible. Again, was Jesus lying when he said in Matthew 19:4, "Haven't you read," he replied, "that in the beginning the Creator made them male and female?" And in Matthew 24:37-39, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, the people were eating, drinking, marrying, and giving in marriage up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. Of course, the evolutionists do not believe in the worldwide flood. So was John guided by the Holy Spirit to write incorrectly in John 1:3? Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that was made. And verse 10, he was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. I don't believe the Holy Spirit was in error in directing him in writing that. As we all know, evolution by way of dinosaurs is pushed on our children at a very early age. Toys, clothes, cartoons on TV and tablets. This book, Grandmother Fish, if you want to look at it later, it'll be up here, is one of the latest for children. This is what the American Library Association had to say about this book. With simple texts and vibrant, cheerful illustrations, this book offers a lively, accessible introduction to the theory of evolution to younger children. As soon as they start school, evolution is pushed on them, and as they advance in their education, the schools become more and more anti-God. College is even worse. Incredibly, a professor from the University of Texas instructed his students with this: never cite religious science sources such as ICR, Answers in Genesis, or anything like that. This caution also extends to the intelligent design movement and any other evolutionary charades. These are 95% wrong. As for the other 5%, they do not know and they make things up, not supported by experimentation. I would tend to disagree with that a lot. All these Christian outfits are doing tremendous amounts of digging into the fossils and like the red blood cells and everything else that's been found. If the thesis of your paper is anti-evolutionary, you will receive a failing grade. Dr. Homer Montgomery. So how do our children learn about the truth in regards to a 24-hour day creation? Many in the church and many of the churches themselves believe that these days are millions of years, or that there were millions of years between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. This is commonly called the gap theory. So how are our children to know about the truth in regards to a 24-hour creation? Many of the churches and many of the people in the churches themselves believe in these millions of years. But if we look at God's word, the word that is translated day in Genesis 1:4 through 24, it is the Hebrew word yam, and this word always means 24 hours when it's associated with a number or the word morning or evening. It always means 24 hours. It's used that way 369 times in the Old Testament outside of Genesis. So why would the word yam mean millions of years only in Genesis 1:4 through 24? Because I don't want to offend anyone, I will not mention the names of the 6 following mainline denominations, but will read their statements on evolution. If you wish to see the whole article, it's number 16 on your handout. This church says the church accepts evolutionary theory as the scientific explanation of the development of life. This is what the leader of this denomination had to say in regards to creation. When you read about creation in Genesis, you run the risk of imagining God as a magician with a magic wand, able to do anything he wants. The Bible tells us that God is omniscient and knowing, all-knowing and omnipotent, able to do anything he chooses. Maybe he didn't read that part. The next church says it has determined that there is no conflict between faith and the theory of evolution. Some of their clergy have stated that it's time for the people of faith to accept evolution. Next, this church passed a resolution to affirm its belief in the glorious ability of God to create in any manner, and it's reaffirming to reject the rigid believers of the creationist movement. The church has skepticism towards the intelligent design movement also. Next, this church says in 1969 the governing body amends its previous position on evolution, which was originally drafted in the 19th century, to affirm that evolution and the Bible do not contradict each other. Next, this church says the theory finds evolutionary theory and Christian faith to be compatible, embracing evolution as a means to see our faith in a new way. And the last one says, God created the universe and all that there is in it, but not necessarily in 24 hours days, and that God actually used evolution in the process of creation. We believe that the theory of evolution is a fundamental scientific fact, one that has stood up to vigorous scrutiny and upon which much human knowledge and achievement rest. To reject this truth or to treat it as one theory among others is to deliberately embrace scientific ignorance and transmit these ignorances to our children. There are two denominations that do believe in a 24-hour creation. They say the church rejects evolution or any theory that denies or limits the work of creation as taught in the scriptures. And the other one issued a resolution rejecting the theory of evolution and stating that creation science cannot be presented solely in terms without any religious doctrine or concepts. There are many smaller denominations and independent churches that believe in creation as stated in the Bible. However, even most of these churches that believe in the biblical account of creation rarely, if ever, proclaim it from the pulpit or in their children's classes. Is it any wonder that about 70% of our youth leave the church by the time they're 20? Here's an excellent book on that. It's called Already Gone by Ken Ham. That'll be up here too if you'd like to take it along. So the subject of a biblical creation, which is basically ignored by the church, is very important to the continuing of the church. It cannot be set aside as a secondary issue by the pastors or those of us who believe in a biblical creation. Let us not only show that evolution is impossible, but that we keep proclaiming it, and that it was God the Father, through Jesus, who did all the creating. The following verses tell us that Jesus is the creator. I'm just going to read one of them, but I'll read the list. It's John 1:3, 1:10, 1 Corinthians 8:6, Ephesians 3:9, Colossians 1:15-20, Hebrews 1:2, Revelation 4:11, 10:6, and 14:7. And I'll just read Colossians 1:15-20. This is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creation. For by him all things were created that are in heaven or that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they are thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All these things were created by him and for him. Here is something that I would like you to think about. Why is it that God the Father or the Holy Spirit didn't come to redeem mankind? Why did the Father send Jesus? Well, you know there's many names for Jesus in the Bible. Of course, one of them is Redeemer. And what does a Redeemer do? He purchases back what once was his. That being humanity through his creation. That's exactly what Jesus did. He paid for the sins of all. It's up to us to accept that payment. We want you to know all about what was discussed here tonight, about creation and the fact that evolution is impossible. But more so, we want you to know that God so loved the world that he gave his one and only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. I hope I have shed a little light on the subject for you, and that you would take the handouts and look into them for more references. I am sure they would enlighten you on the subject and help you see God in all things. I'd like to close with the words of Paul to Timothy. They're found in 1 Timothy 6:20. O Timothy, keep what is committed to thy trust. Avoid profane babbling and opposition to knowledge or science, falsely so-called. That's exactly what evolution is. Science, falsely so-called. So that's it.
I'll stop recording here.